By the end of this video, we're going to have our camera following our player around and also staying within the confines of our set boundaries. So for me, that's the fence around this town. This will also work if you don't want to set boundaries around your town, so don't worry about it. So cool, let's take a look. In our previous video, we set up our tile maps and added different layers so we could create this little town scene. I've just made it look a little prettier and added a fence around the edge, which I'm going to use as the guidelines for our boundaries. These will be collidable so our player can't walk out, and our camera won't be able to leave the bounds of these walls. Because right now our player can walk off wherever he wants and leave our camera view. So we're first going to get our camera following our player, and then if you want to do this you can, where we're going to add boundaries for each section of our map so the camera won't be able to leave this town. But yeah, this is optional, depending on how you want your game. These boundaries we're going to add, it's going to be a bit like in Zelda, where you get to the edge and then move to the next screen. But if you want your game to be more of an open world kind of feel, and not so grid based, you can just skip this bit, that's fine. So cool, first of all, to get our camera following our player, what I'm going to do is go to Window, Package Manager, and in the search bar, search for Cinemachine. Cinemachine is a tool made by Unity, which makes adding camera movement much easier. If you click Install, and wait for this to install, and once this is done installing, you can close this down. Now over in our hierarchy, if we right click and go down the bottom to Cinemachine, you'll see one called 2D Camera. You click on this. I'm just going to rename this CM Cam, since it's a Cinemachine camera. And then with this selected, if you take a look in your inspector, you can see there's a slot here called Follow. If you click and drag on our player from the hierarchy into this Follow slot and press play, now when we move around, our camera follows our player. Amazing, perfect. Now you might have noticed, but as we walk around, you can see some white lines popping up between our sprites and a bit of tearing. To fix this, if we go into our Tilesets folder, in our assets, right click and go Create, 2D, Sprite Atlas. I'll just name this Sprite Atlas. Then you can grab our tile sets and drag them into objects for packing. So I'll do this on our floors and also on our house tile set. Then set filter mode to be point and click Pack Preview. When we press play, you'll no longer get this tearing between your sprites. So cool, now we have our sprites not tearing and we have our camera following our player. Next up, let's get the camera not showing these blue edges on the side and sticking just within the boundary of our town. So the Cinemachine actually has a handy extension we can use called a confiner, which does exactly what we want to do with keeping our camera within these bounds. So under extensions, you can click Add Extension and look for Cinemachine Confiner. Next you can see it's asking for a bounding shape. So we need to draw out the bounds and give it to the collider so it knows where to keep the camera. So in our hierarchy, I'm going to right click and create a new empty object, and I'm going to call this our map bounds. I'm going to use this object as the holder that's going to contain all our different boundaries. So we're going to have one for down in the town and another one for up in the forest, and any other direction you want, it'll make kind of like a little grid for us. So on our map bounds, I'm going to right click on this and go create empty again. And since this is a town and our first town, I'm just going to call it T1. In my head that makes sense. You can call this whatever you like, but I'm thinking like maybe I'll have another town and I'll call it T2. And for a forest I'll call it F1. You could do this any way you like. Like I said, this could be like battleships, so this could be A1 and this could be B1, you know, columns and grids, and you had one over here and it's called B2 and this one's A2. I don't know, whatever you feel like. But on our T1, which is going to be for my town's boundary, I'm going to add a component and search for a Polygon Collider 2D. If I click on Edit Collider, you can see we've got this little pentagon, not a pentagram. So I'm going to want it to be like a box. So if I open up points and paths and then element, I'm going to set the size to be 4. So we've got 4 little edges here. I'm going to just click and drag these out. If I zoom in a bit so you can see, I'm going to click and drag these out around our fence. I'm going a bit over, but basically where you draw is going to be where our camera can see to. So if you wanted to see a bit on the edge, you can do, you know, it could go a bit wide. On this side, why not? But to show you, I'll leave this side wide and this side short, just so you can see what it's like. And since we want to be able to walk through this collider and not get stopped by it, you want to set is trigger to be true by ticking this little checkbox. And then if we click back on our Cinemachine, you can see on our Cinemachine Confiner 2D, we have this bounding shape empty. We can drag T1 object over into this and it'll grab the Polygon Collider for us. And just before I press play, our camera's lens ortho size was a bit big. So I'm going to set that to 5, just so it was actually zoomed in on our little player there. So when I press play, our camera now follows our player around and stops on that edge. You can see we got a little leeway since we made the confiner bigger there. And there he goes, walking to the side, and it stops on the edge there. Cool, now we got our camera working, which is all well and good for when our player's inside our town. But wait a minute, where are you going? He's just left the town and he's left the camera view. So what we're going to want to add next is transition points from one map to another. And of course, to keep this bite-sized, I'll put that in the next video. For your convenience, this whole package is going to be on my Patreon, along with all other code I've ever written. All my work. It's all up there. For only £5, which is basically like you're stealing from me, really. So you can support the channel there if you like. But if not, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!